Direct response copywriting is important because it essentially plays a huge role in whether or not your content marketing campaigns succeed. Hi, as you can see, this is obviously quite a different podcast episode this week because it's the first episode where I'm showing my face, and this is something that's completely new to me, so it might be a little bit unnatural for the first couple of episodes, but as I get used to actually talking and speaking into the camera at the same time, I'm sure that I'll get used to it. I decided to kind of do this because I've really been getting into TikTok recently, so I really want to be able to use my podcast not only to provide you guys with value, but also if I make this a video-based podcast, then I'll be able to repurpose this content. But that said, I also wanted to kind of get used to making videos, and I felt like the way that I could easily get used to making videos was by starting recording my podcast, simply because I'm already used to recording the podcast. So that's not really an intimidating thing for me. I find that I don't have as much of an issue thinking off the top of my head and saying what I think needs to be said in order to deliver value. I do plan what I write from time to time, but generally speaking, I have quite a good idea of what it is that I actually want to say before I start recording. So I felt like in a podcast scenario where my podcast setup, it's very much stream of consciousness, where I just sit down and talk about whatever comes to mind. Obviously, I have one central topic, but generally speaking, I kind of record this on the fly, if you will. So that's what this podcast is going to look like moving forward. I'm hoping to transition it to a video-based podcast. As I mentioned before, this episode is going to be focused on direct response copywriting, and direct response copywriting is something that I have quite a lot of experience with. I feel like something that a lot of marketers have experience with, and they don't know that they have experience with it because it's something that fuels our campaigns on a day-to-day basis. It's a very basic concept, but actually getting to the point where you can write really powerful direct response copy that genuinely appeals to your target audience is quite tricky. And it's taken me years and years to kind of perfect the art of direct response copywriting. And I don't even think that I am at that point yet where I have perfected it. I think that there's still lots of things that I can learn, but I know that as a new marketer, writing direct response copy can be quite intimidating because it's the bit that pushes your audience to make the sale. And I know sales is quite a tricky subject for a lot of people. A lot of people have limiting beliefs over sales. So that can be quite challenging to get around if sales is something that you don't enjoy. But there are obviously ways to approach direct response copy that is really compelling for your audience without being too pushy or too salesy. And I just wanted to share some of those with you today in case you're feeling a little bit concerned or you don't think that you're being salesy enough or you're being too salesy. I just wanted to share with you some tips so that you can make better copy and get more sales for your business. As always, this is going to be quite a rambly episode, so let's just get straight into it. Before we can actually get started writing direct response copy, we need to understand what it actually is. And simply put, direct response copywriting is essentially any copy that persuades your target audience to take action in that moment. So common examples of direct response copy that you may already be using in your business include any CTAs that you're writing at the end of a blog post or in captions on social media. You might also be using direct message responses. So a lot of business owners like to individually message their prospects on social media, asking them to do something, whether it be to subscribe to a newsletter or to actually book a sales call. Ad copywriting is included in direct response copy as well. That said, there are some differences. It depends on the style of ad that you're writing and what the objective of the ad is. You'll also have things like sales letters and landing pages as well, which is what I have the most experience with. And even emails. So for example, any promotional emails that you send out throughout the month. If you're a B2C brand and you have a lot of sales. A lot of the time you want your audience, your subscribers to actually act in that moment. So being able to write really persuasive direct response copy is intrinsic to the success of your campaigns. I've kind of already touched upon this, but direct response copywriting is important because it essentially plays a huge role in whether or not your content marketing campaigns succeed. Without it, you will really struggle to encourage users to take action that you need them to take. And doing this in the first place is a long process, and it can take many iterations to get used to writing in that form. But it is really an important skill for any business owner to learn. If you can pick up the skill at the beginning of your journey, you're going to have a much easier time building your business because you'll sound confident and you'll be persuasive. And if you can pick up how to write in this kind of language, then when you're on like sales calls, discovery calls, and you're messaging prospective clients on social media, you will more likely be able to convince them to work with you than those that don't have as much of a good understanding of what direct response copywriting is. So now that we actually know what direct response copywriting is and why it's so important for your business, let's take a look at some of the top tips that I have picked up over the years that can really supercharge your direct response copy moving forward. My first top tip, and this is really important regardless of whether or not you want to improve your direct response copywriting, but it's really important to do, and that is to define your messaging. I find that if you've noticed that you get a little engagement or you have a huge bounce rate, then the chances are that your messaging is off because your audience aren't engaging with your copy the way that they should, because your messaging should be perfectly aligned with their values and what they want from a business and the solution that they're after. Although it may sound quite tricky, fixing your messaging is quite an easy thing to do. I think it just starts by asking yourself some simple questions that you can answer, which will give you clarification on why your messaging just isn't working. So one of my favorite questions to start with is by this. Firstly, is it clear what you're actually offering, and is your language clear as well? Sometimes when we have quite a complex business offering, it can be quite hard for us as business owners who are very attached to it to condense that down. But that said, our goal as copywriters is to do just that. We need to be able to simplify complex topics or complex concept for our prospects in order for them to actually understand what our offering is and whether or not they should actually engage with it. At the end of the day, your audience just won't buy something that they don't understand. So being able to really nail down what it is that you offer, what your unique selling point is, and generally who it's for, and things like price points. It's really important to be able to kind of condense that down into, I would say, 1 to 2 sentences max. The shorter is always the better. And obviously, if you can use really clear and concise language, then that's going to really help you condense that messaging and package up your offering in a way that's super appealing. The next question that I like to ask is, what is it that your competitors are doing really well? If you look at your competitors' social media or ad campaigns, you can often see how many likes they get, how many comments or shares they get. That's normally a good indication that whatever their messaging is really resonating with their target audience. And obviously, to an extent, their target audience is your target audience because they're your competitors. So you are kind of sharing the same pool of people who will be interested in the type of product or service that you're offering. So make sure that you're looking at your competitors, make sure that you're understanding what it is about their messaging that really works. Try and analyze it. Don't just look at the engagement and think, okay, we need to replicate that. Think about exactly what it is that they're doing and why it's working, and see if there's any patterns, because oftentimes in copywriting there is quite a lot of patterns involved. There's lots of different frameworks that you can follow. We'll go into more details about those frameworks later on, but it's really important to be able to identify those because those are the frameworks that you will want to learn if your competitors are using them and doing it really well. The other question that you'll want to ask yourself is, what is your main USP? And chances are you actually already have a USP identified if you're not in the planning stages and you've been building your business for quite a while style, you may think that you actually do have a USP sorted. But if you're not attracting anyone, chances are your USP isn't actually as strong as you think it is. And being able to identify that and incorporating that into direct response copy is key to success. So I would recommend looking over your USP, seeing how you've actually written it across your campaigns and whether or not there's improvements that you can make. And obviously you can use your competitors for inspiration. Obviously don't copy them, but using them for inspiration can be really powerful to just ensuring that your copy isn't boring, because you want to make your copy interesting. You don't just want to say this is what we do. You want to be able to include narrative threads and use personalization and things like that. My next tip for writing really powerful direct response copy is to know what action you want your audience to take before you sit down to write. A lot of the reason for confusion when new copywriters are struggling to see any conversions with their copy is that they haven't actually given the reader the information they need to be able to take the next steps. For example, contact us isn't enough. In this day and age, there's lots of different ways that consumers can actually get in contact with the business that they want to potentially buy from. So it's really important that in your copy you say exactly what it is that the reader needs to do, how the reader actually contacts you, so whether it's a form, whether they need to book a call with you, or whether they can just contact you by email or message you on social media. It's really helpful on landing pages where you need to use direct response copy that you have a more interactive element to help prompt a response. So for example, on my website, I have a lot of forms so that the user knows exactly how to contact me. I say fill out the form below. Obviously that's very clear. They can see the form. There's no friction for them having to search more pages of my website. They don't have to go through any menus or sub-menus or anything like that. It's just there for them to do it if they want to. On my contact page, I do have all the ways that my prospects can get in contact with me, and if they find me through social media, then I make it very clear how to find out more information. So for example, on Instagram, I personally use a link tree, which I know is quite a widely debated topic amongst social media managers. But personally, I use Linktree just because I have multiple offers, and I find that if you're going to use Linktree, actually using more links is really effective because it gives your audience choices. And I know marketers don't like the idea of choices a lot of the time. They want to minimize choice as much as possible, but actually giving your prospects and your audience choice when they're deciding whether or not they want to interact with your brand and whether or not they want to learn more about you is really valuable, because they can find what they want out of you. It's not just a one and done thing. They're not just clicking on one link, and it also just helps them navigate through all the content that you have online. There's a lot of really amazing sources out there where there's so much content, but just having one link to your website is just not going to be enough for a lot of modern day users. I find as well, modern day users don't have a lot of patience. Obviously, the rise of short form vertical video content has made this really difficult and tricky for marketers to get people to stop scrolling in the first place, because people's attention spans are just so low. That said, if the marketing is interesting and appeals to them, then they will want to click. And when they do click, you want to make sure that there's no friction when the time comes to get them to take the action that you want them to take. At the end of the day, if your customers don't take that action, then your business doesn't grow. So that's why you need to be so sure of what it is that you need your audience to do in order to take those steps. Just because you know what to do doesn't necessarily mean that it's obvious to your readers what it is, because there's lots of different minds out there. You obviously have to consider readability and being accessible. It's really important to be inclusive and just make sure that you're making your user journey as easy as possible. And the best way to do that when it comes to actually writing copy is by giving the reader really clear instructions. And obviously, by using clear and concise language like we talked about before, this is going to be a lot easier than if you were to use a lot of jargon to try and impress someone. So that's really important to getting down some really strong direct response copy. It's just knowing what it is that you want your reader to do and then spelling it out for them in very clear, concrete language. tip that I have for you if you want to write some really powerful direct response copy is to learn the basics of copywriting. Now, this is quite an obvious tip, but a lot of people don't actually know what copywriting is and what makes it different from content writing. A lot of people who are writing their own copy come from the background of content writing. Personally, I come from a mixture of both copy and content, so I fit in the middle, and in that sense I have a much easier time writing copy for my business because I'm coming at it from a copywriting background. But I'm also using the tools that I picked up whilst working in content marketing to actually be able to write interesting copy, being able to tell narratives, and using different frameworks, and being able to identify the appropriate TOVs, which is tone of voice, in case you didn't know, for the target audience that I personally am trying to appeal to. And the thing to remember here is that learning copywriting is a long process. Like with all skills, you've got to actually sit down and put the work into it. You've got to practice. And like I said before, even though I've been working in marketing and copywriting for 5-6 years now, I'm not perfect. I still need to learn the basics every so often. I still need to brush up because it's very easy to get into the habit of writing in a certain way. And sometimes, because of the monotony of that, I do kind of need to remind myself what it is I'm actually doing, what the purpose of the copy that I'm writing is, and what are the absolute basics and fundamentals of copywriting that I can actually implement into my copy to make sure that it reads really well. If you're new to copywriting and are particularly intimidated by direct response copy, here's a couple of tips that I find really helpful for improving your copy instantly. And the first is to learn the AIDA formula. AIDA stands for awareness, interest, desire, and action. And this model is actually what a lot of sales funnels are built around. You can also take this model and implement it into your copywriting. And it's just really powerful because it helps you understand where the reader's coming from, what motions they might be going through when they are reading your copy, and where to actually trigger that inspiration and provoke that desire to take action. So that's a really useful framework to be able to craft some powerful direct response copy. And it's also very short as well, because you're trying to get someone to take action quickly. You don't want your direct response copy to be long. A lot of the time it's going to be quite short. So just remember that and use that framework to help you identify whether or not your copy has the key points that will be needed in order to provoke your target audience to take action. You're also going to want to create a sense of urgency, and urgency is something that I really struggle with, but whenever I do include a sense of urgency, the copy that I write tends to get 10 times more traction. Obviously that's an arbitrary number, but generally speaking it gets way more traction because it kind of sets off alarm bells and almost leverages the anxious mind in a way and just gets your prospect thinking now and in the moment rather than putting it off. That's the purpose of direct response copy. It's supposed to capture leads in the moment and get them to really think, I need to solve this problem now. They obviously have a pain point that needs to be cured, and you need to be able to provide them with a strong solution, and you need to show them that your solution will help you cure that pain point instantly. But if they don't act on it, then a really good way to get them to act in the moment is to tease them a little bit and basically say, if you don't act now, this will go away, or it will be more expensive, or whatever it is, whatever you know is something that won't appeal to your target audience. Create an offer that's really appealing, but make it like a one-time thing. Obviously, marketing doesn't work like that. A lot of marketers will recycle the same offers and campaigns will go on in the background, but it still creates a sense of, I need to do this now. The prospect doesn't need to know that. There's a lot of ways that you can go about this, and I think that how you implement a sense of urgency often depends on your moral compass. I think it's a reason why I, for example, have a big issue with some ways that I see copywriters implementing this tip, but just giving them a little push is often enough for them to actually act in the moment. Another tip that I wanted to touch on is is that you need to tell a narrative too, and it can be quite hard to tell a narrative that's really interesting with direct response copy, because you feel like a narrative is a grand thing and you need lots of words for that, but the truth is a narrative is just a beginning, middle and an end. It's a story, so you can tell a short story in just a few simple words, and I find that stories that focus around transformation are the most important stories to be able to tell if you want to write good direct response copy. So for example, the before after bridge, that's a really solid copywriting framework that you're going to want to learn and practice, because it illustrates the transformation. It focuses on the offering, but that's not what it focuses on at its heart. It focuses on the audience, and your target audience is essentially the main character. They are going through the motions theoretically. They are seeing what their life is like now, and obviously they can resonate with that because they are having those pain points and those feelings, and then obviously they will be shown what their life would be like after. Throughout the copy they'll be shown how to achieve this goal, and that should really encourage them to want to solve the pain point. So using narrative structures like that can really help you structure your copy in a way that's going to compel your target audience. And it shouldn't be long again, but you can still achieve these kind of narrative structures with just a few sentences. And my last tip for writing really powerful copy and learning the basics of copy is to get good at writing CTAs. So CTAs are what I personally associate the most with direct response copy, because it is prompting an action, but they can be really simple. You obviously see a lot of different types of CTAs and a lot of different approaches to them. Some are softer than others. It really entirely depends on your target audience how you approach this. If you know that your target audience is quite stubborn, they might need a bit more of a push and a bit more of a sense of urgency. They just need to be prompted and provoked to take action. Whereas if you know that your target audience has a long sales cycle, then you're going to want to consider that, because the reason why it's long is because they have a lot to consider. So it's very good to have a softer approach. Just learning what it is that works with your audience, testing out different CTAs, leveraging A/B testing as well. You can use the analytics data that you have to ensure that your CTAs are actually performing, and if they're not, that's an excuse for you to review your CTA and how you're actually getting your audience to take action, because that's a sign that something's off and it's not quite working with them. So yeah, that's it. That's everything I have to share with you, and all of the top tips that I have for writing really powerful direct response copy that will contribute to business growth. I've also written a blog post with a bonus tip over there, so if you want a slightly more detailed version of this podcast episode, then I'll leave that in the description box below. As always, if you like this episode, please like this video and follow us on YouTube so that you can be made aware of any new podcast episodes that drop. I'm hoping to incorporate a lot more video in my content strategy moving forward, so hopefully you will see more than just my podcast on here. So that would be really fun, and I'm really looking forward to it. This has actually been a much easier transition than I thought it would be. I've been recording for about half an hour now, and I already feel way more at ease. I don't feel very shy. It doesn't really bother me that I can see my face directly in the camera. I'm just happy kind of sitting here and talking about what I love, which is obviously marketing. And if you did need help with marketing, please do get in touch with Megan Taylor Creative. We're a full service content marketing agency offering creative solutions for small business owners who are looking to stand out from busy markets. We work with a lot of different brands, from ag tech to ed tech and also fintech as well. We also work with other digital marketing agencies who just need to outsource projects as well. And if you did need any help with planning your campaigns or just organising your days as a freelancer or digital marketing agency owner, we do have a lot of free templates available over at our website. We have a sales funnel template, an Instagram audit template, and obviously content planning templates as well, as that is generally what we specialise in here at Megan Taylor Creative. Again, I'll leave those in the description box below. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye!